Facebook. Hope you're doing all right today. Welcome to this lunchtime live from Leeds Fashion Futures, which of course is a zero waste Leeds project, working with the RSA, looking at how we can have a more sustainable approach to fashion on a city level and what we need to do to make that happen. Today, as part of our Leeds Fashion Futures Heritage Week, oh, that sounds so good, doesn't it? Leeds Fashion Futures Heritage Week. We're going back in time to learn a bit about a part of our textile history here in Leeds. But before we do, I'm Peg Alexander, Leeds-based presenter and journalist and person who cares very deeply about making our city a zero-waste city, and someone who also cares more about clothes and fashion than I should, to be quite honest, because it makes me feel a bit vacuous, but there you go. But on to our guests. Our main guest today is Rachel Moaby, who's the archive curator and manager of Sunnybank Mills Archive in Farsley. Now, this is a unique textile collection still in the mill building where it was made. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, thank you for being here. And we've also got Rob Greenland from Zero Waste Leeds Fashion Futures with us on the call. Rob, as well, you know, we might get round to talking a bit potentially about Montague Burton's. I know you've been doing some research into them as well. And also the news we've had this week about the fact that Boohoo have bought Burton's, and
it feels like it's quite a pivotal time, isn't it? I think our timing, you know, is quite interesting in terms of looking back and looking forward. So yeah, hopefully we'll have a bit more of a chat about that later on.
Yeah, cool. So now, if you are watching, and I can see we have Dawn watching us already, please do join in the chat. I'll be monitoring it here. We've got a super technical setup here, so I've got an iPad. I'll be monitoring that as well, and we'll bring your comments into the conversation. Make comments, ask questions, be part of it, because that's the whole point of these. But Rachel, you've got the most amazing. That is a real behind you. That is not a backdrop, is it? You're not in front of a green screen like me. That is actually the archive up at Sunnybank Mills in Farsley. So come on, take it away. Tell us all about this archive that you work for.
Yes, well, I know I'm biased, but it's a very special and unique collection. As you say, still in the buildings where it was created. So the textile industry of West Yorkshire was massive during the Industrial Revolution. And this archive was part of it, you know, this collection, the cloth produced here was part of it. So Sunnybank Mills, there's been a mill on this site in Farsley since the 1700s. And it was a club mill to begin with. So the weavers worked at home, they clubbed together, finished the cloth, and then took it into Leeds or Bradford.
It was really high-end cloth as well, wasn't it? It wasn't sort of cheap stuff. It was, you know, proper Savile Row, that kind of cloth.
To start off with, it was just basic textiles, but the first big mill owner was Edwin Woodhouse, and he was mayor of Leeds twice, so he built the brand up, and that's when it became the fine worsted suit cloth material that was, definitely destined for Burberry, Jaeger. It was expensive stuff. So if you worked at Sunnybank Mills, you had very high textile skills, you know, and in fact, the workers that I've spoken to in all their histories, you know, if you worked at Sunnybank Mills, you made Edwin Woodhouse cloth, you could work anywhere. So it was a very high-end cloth, very special.
So were they very much jobs people wanted, the Sunnybank Mills jobs, they were the ones that people really wanted to get?
Around this area, I mean, Leeds area had hundreds of textile mills, so you could take your pick when the Industrial Revolution. I don't think it was a nice place to live, but you could take your pick as to which mill you were going to work in. But yeah, I mean, Farsley area in the 1800s had 12 textile mills, so we were just part of the bigger picture. But yeah, if you wanted to create a high quality cloth, then you would learn your skills in somewhere like Sunnybank Mills. But
see, I think I find that really interesting that you're saying just Farsley on its own, you know, which obviously would have been a little village at that time, had 12 mills, because I always think of Leeds being where the clothes were sewn, not where the fabric was made. You kind of think that's over in Bradford, you know, or the cotton over in Manchester. So Farsley had 12 mills. That's really, really interesting. Maybe we've got more of a history there than loads of us actually realise.
Oh, absolutely. I think we've lost a lot of that. You know, there are bits of buildings left or derelict, and there, you know, we have the Bradford Industrial Museum and Armley Mills that look at the industrial past. But yeah, a lot of that has been lost and forgotten, or become, you know, high-rise apartments or chic places to live rather than, and loses all its history. You may have the kind of brick wall behind me, but you wouldn't have any of the context, you know, all the objects and things that we still have here, really.
Are you the only mill curator in the world?
I don't know. Well, looking after a collection that's still in the building that was manufactured, I think I could say yes to that one. But yeah, most of the...
How did you, sorry, go on.
No.
I was just going to say, how did you get involved in it yourself? What was your, well, how did you come to get involved?
Yeah, how did I, a curiosity and a nosiness. I think that's what you need to be a curator and look after archives. You just have to be passionate about those things. My mum was into textiles, so I've always been brought up around textiles. But I mean, my previous job was a nurse. I was a nurse for many, many years. But I just changed career quite a long time ago now. And I ended up here by chance. They just moved up the mill closed in 2008. They were starting to regenerate. They didn't want to get rid of all the history, so they moved it up here into the warping shed. So I'm in one of the sheds that would have been used during the manufacture. It's a bit chilly sometimes.
Yeah, today.
The proper mill. And yeah, they moved it all up here, and I just by chance stumbled upon the archive and asked them what they were doing with it, and they didn't quite know what to. So I said, well, you need to let everyone know this. This can't be forgotten. This can't be just lost or the door's locked. People need to access it. People need to learn from it, to examine the objects, to figure out that, you know, textile industry uses every subject. You know, anyone can connect with some elements of it, from science to arts. You know, it's all in here.
Wow. And of course they've got examples, haven't they, of everything that they made.
Yeah. So I've got a little banner here that sort of shows you more of the room behind me. So it's got all the cloth samples we have. We've got Farsley loom. We've got guard books, which are referencing books, and they're big, beautiful leather bound books. Well, they were in the 1800s. By 1970s, it's a cardboard folder. But that's
progress for you.
Exactly. And they're the referencing books that the designers would pick into, because obviously the cloth being produced here was for the fashion market, which is a fickle market. And they had to develop, you know, season ranges of cloth. So I have all the guard books, so those referencing systems from the 1800s until they closed the doors, which is really quite special.
No, interesting. And is there I mean, this is probably trying to kind of condense 300 years.
And 2008 was...
Sorry, Peg. Yeah. I was just going to ask about, in terms of the...
No, you carry on, Rob. Sorry, yeah. We've got a few technical...
We've got a bit of a lag. Yeah. Sorry, I will continue. But I mean, I'm interested in the almost kind of condensing 300 years history in 15 minutes or something. But I'm interested in, you know, it feels like other work that we've done and we've looked into, you know, I mean, obviously things seem to change quite a lot in the kind of 1970s more broadly, about, you know, clothing being kind of manufactured abroad and that kind of thing. I mean, in terms of what led to the mill actually closing and then it's kind of reopening in a different form, is there a simple story to tell about what kind of changed in the market that the mill was in? Yeah,
well, as I said, fashion is a fickle beast, and that is part of it. And the other part is they made it cheaper elsewhere. They went to countries that had no health and safety for the dye process. Things like that happened historically, and have always happened. Textile mill history is up and down constantly throughout its time. Like, you know, in relation to the 1800s, there was a wool shortage, and then they had to figure out how to produce cloth without that much wool coming into the country, and the whole shoddy industry around Yorkshire was producing, you know, a cheaper cloth from the recycled elements that nobody else wanted. So
tell us a bit about shoddy, because some people may not realise where that word shoddy comes from. I mean, that was made around the Batley area, wasn't it? It was a particular type of cloth.
Yeah, but I mean, now it's got a different meaning. Shoddy usually means that it's cheap, nasty, and falls apart quickly. The actual shoddy industry that was created around Yorkshire and mostly around this area was basically off that, you know, they had to recycle the remnants, the leftovers from the tailors, the the clothes that nobody could physically wear anymore. They were falling apart so much. The whole rag and bone man, even I remember that. That wasn't that long ago. I don't think I'm that old. But, you know, so they recycled it. They ripped it all apart in a contraption that they called the devil. Ripped it all apart and made wool fibre again, added new wool fibre, a small amount, or as much as they could get at the time, and produces a cheap cloth. And most of it was pretty decent. It was for blankets, it was for uniforms, but obviously, some industries, some businesses wanted to make a bit more money, so hence the reason it became shoddy cloth, because some just put in far too much of the shoddy. And in fact, even the waste from the shoddy industry went into be used as manure for farming. So absolutely nothing was wasted.
Wow.
Yeah, and it is interesting, isn't it, how Yorkshire it is quite a centre of that, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And again, was that a kind of partly a geographical kind of thing in terms of what natural resources were around?
Yeah, well, I mean, the textile industry historically started down south,
right,
in small sort of cottage industries, but it moved up to this area for two really big reasons. One, the Industrial Revolution. We made all the machinery quicker, so we took over the south as competition. Keithley, you know, being a prime example, making the Hattersley loom. And the water. West Yorkshire has beautiful soft water, and you need water for the process of making textiles in all areas, you know, from washing the mucky wool that comes in to the dye process, etc. So yeah, there's big reasons why it came here. I mean, we did have cotton mills as well, but the majority was wool.
It was wool and textiles, yeah. So, and tell us a bit about what's happening at the mill now, because did you say, did it close? Was it 2011 that it closed?
2008 they closed the doors because competition got too much, and they luckily are connected to the history of the mill, and they didn't want to knock it all down or make it flats or a phone centre, you know, call centre and things like that. They wanted to keep their heritage still in the story. So all the buildings have been, you know, sympathetically redeveloped, and there's lots of other businesses here, and you know, interesting buildings, you know, want interesting places to be in, to be inspired in. So it's got some really nice businesses developing in here, but luckily they've kept the heart and the history, from my perspective.
Yeah. It's a beautiful,
It
it's
needs
a
to be
beautiful
there to tell the story of why it's here. I mean, it's on this site because there's waterways underneath us. That's
So ordinarily, if we weren't in COVID, people could come and have a look, couldn't they?
I know, but we are the web page. I did last year a 360 tour of the archive, so you can actually go onto our Sunnybank webpage and virtually visit, until you can really visit, of course. And William and John Gaunt, I persuaded them to do a tour of the mill site. So there's recordings of them as well that give a background to the history and the regeneration. So we're still sort of virtually there. But yeah, we'd love to be open again, but not to be at the moment.
Yeah. But there will be opportunity, obviously, once things get back to kind of normal. There will be, people will be able to visit the archive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we run events on the site. There's market store, you know, they do different events for Christmas, etc. There's a gallery here as well. I do school workshops. Any groups can come and visit. Researchers come from far and wide. In fact, we've had people from Australia, Canada here. Most of the cloth was made from merino wool, which is from Australia. So that's the connection there.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Because I read something Peg was saying before about having read up a bit on Montague Burt, and I read something about him that he went on a bit of a world tour, as I think people did around that kind of time, and I mean he was almost treated as royalty in New Zealand, I think, because I think Burtons were at the time the biggest kind of buyer of New Zealand wool in the world at the time, you know, and I've always been interested in why wool. I mean, wool just seems like an absolutely amazing material to me, and I never quite understand why. I mean, you hear about, you know, farmers having to kind of give away the fleeces these days, and I just don't. Maybe this is a whole other Oh, well, the chat.
No, but that
an
is
amazing
true, Rob. That is
material.
true, because just before lockdown started, I was on tour with Amanda Owen, the Yorkshire shepherdess.
Of course, yeah.
And she talked quite a lot about what they were doing with the fleeces, and effectively they're kind of having, you know, they're so worthless now, the fleeces. And one of the things they're doing up there is they're trying out stuff to try and help with flooding by putting the fleeces down on the peat.
Yeah, right, interesting.
As a natural way to try and stop the runoff of the water. There's a particular experiment that they're trying, but I was really shocked when she was saying they're virtually worthless.
Yeah, it's such a shame. There's such a different. I mean, it's good quality wool in England. It's such a shame it's not been used, but I think it's been overtaken by these sort of niche specific cloths. Merino is incredibly fine. And really soft, and it's white as well, so it takes up dye better. So
right, okay.
We have a bit of a disadvantage, probably down to our weather. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. Some reason. I'm no expert on sheep, but because it's coarser and yellower in England. So
that's interesting, right? Yeah. So it might be that there's a need to find more alternative markets for it. I mean, you see maybe around the kind of flood relief. I mean, some of the work we've done on housing in the past. You know, people that there's kind of insulation materials you could buy as well, isn't it? That are kind of natural, you know. But it just seems like it's another bit of this market that isn't quite working as it needs to. When you kind of wonder where it, you know, and in a sense, this is part of the Leeds Fashion Futures thing to think, well, what can we do locally in the future that might create slightly different local economies around some of these kind of materials, you know, particularly in clothing, but kind of more generally as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that does take us a little bit onto that whole question of Burton's, doesn't it, and Boohoo, because this week we've had the news that Boohoo have bought, well, it's Dorothy Perkins, Burton's. I'm just trying to think what else is in the group.
One other brand, I can't quite remember now. Yeah.
But of course, you know, Burton's the first place really to manufacture off the peg suits. And, you know, the largest suit manufacturing factory in the world, and, you know, really the very much the home of kind of that off the peg clothing and mass production of clothing. But of course, going to Boohoo, that means that it's, you know, it's very much in the kind of fast fashion era now, isn't it? And the online fashion, and of course, in terms of Leeds Fashion Futures, a lot of what this is about us actually trying to recapture our relationship with our clothes, quite the opposite of fast fashion.
Yeah. I mean, it's been fascinating looking back at Montague Burton. I mean, there's a video that we'll share. We shared yesterday, and I'll put it below this video as well, where at Leeds Civic Trust. Conversation with a couple of historians who've looked into his life. I mean, there's the kind of the personal thing I find fascinating itself. I mean, he came to Britain as a 15-year-old, kind of, you know, fleeing the pogroms in Eastern Europe. You know, he's 15 years of age, and then within 3 years he'd set up his first shop. I think it was in Chesterfield, I think.
Wow.
And then basically he wanted to get involved in the kind of manufacture as well as the kind of retailing. So and you know, Leeds, as I understand it, was a real kind of manufacturing kind of hub, and he came here. And as you say, that Hudson Mill site in Hare Hills, I mean, 10,000 people kind of employed there at its height, and you know, amazing. And I think the thing that I find quite interesting is, you know, and again, there might be other stories as well that I've not heard yet, but people speak of Burton's as being a good place to work. You know, the wages were that bit kind of higher than others. When you see kind of layouts of the Hunter Mill site, you know, there was quite a lot in terms of how they looked after the staff, in terms of a really nice canteen and on-site medical facilities, which again, you know, was good entrepreneurial kind of nous as well, because if your staff didn't have to disappear for a morning to go to a medical appointment, they were back at back working quicker. But I suppose I'm just interested in we were much closer to our you know, where our clothing was made then, you know, very different times, but much closer to where it was made. But also, and I'm not pretending it was perfect, it was of its time, but people were, you know, earning a fairly decent living, kind of working in those places. And I think, as Rachel was saying before, some of that kind of migration of where our clothes have been made has very much been about getting them made in places where it's much cheaper. The conditions aren't as good, you know, and I think even though it can be hard to work out what to do sometimes, I think we do need to engage with those issues, don't we? And think, well, who is making our clothes, and is there a way we can influence that a bit? So, you know, if people should have a decent living making the clothes I'm wearing today, shouldn't they? You know, it's a very basic kind of thing. So
I
yeah,
think
it's fascinating to look back.
If a t-shirt costs £2, you've got to think about what the person who was made it was paid.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, the thing that gets really difficult is if a t-shirt costs £25, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person who made it was paid any more money, which is one of the things that kind of gets quite complicated. But at those, you know, those levels, I think we do need to think about, it's all very well that we've got access to cheap clothes, but who's paying the price really for that? Just to say, if you're watching at home, please do join in, make some comments. We are monitoring, kind of join in the debate. We'd love to hear from you. Ask any questions, make some comments, and we'll bring them into the chat. I mean, one, because of course, you know, we had all that in Leeds. The one thing that I always think is quite amazing is there's an organisation in Bradford. I'm sure you'll know them, Rachel. I never
Is she frozen?
get their name
Don't
right. Something like that. And they've got original not the patents, but they've got the formulas and something for every dye in the world.
All right. I missed a bit of what you said there, Peg. What was it? Who
Yeah,
was
sorry,
it?
it's in and out. So they've got, it's not the patents, but they've got the formulas on they own for every dye for fabric in the world.
Oh, that's in Bradford.
Society of Dyers and Colorists.
Colorists, yeah, in Bradford, yeah. They
Yeah.
used to have a colour museum.
Yeah,
They used to have a little colour museum.
it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right, very good.
but again, so there you've got this organisation in the middle of Bradford that still actually is in some ways is right an international hub of, you know, even though none of the fabric is made here anymore, it's all over the world. But you know, this was where it was at.
I think also our relationship with clothes has changed. You know, we're throwaway. It's casual. There's no connection to it. You know, if you look historically, this was fine worsted suit cloth. You bought a suit, you kept your suit, and you bought the best you could afford. And I think that element of our society has just disappeared.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to try to think about how that can be relevant in our modern context, isn't it? You know, I think we also don't want to go back to a time, and I'm sure you're not saying this, we don't want to go back to a time when we've only got one decent bit of clothing. Do you know what I mean? That's not what we want. But I think, you know, in the last 12 months has been quite interesting in this, that maybe fewer clothes, but better clothes. You know what I mean? And clothes that we look after, we keep
more elasticated clothes, Rob.
More elasticated.
If we're talking about the last 12 months, more elasticated clothes.
Very true.
Yeah. Things that are nice here and don't show the stomach, frankly.
Right, there you go. Yeah. So there's all sorts of trends that have been very kind of useful to it. But it's interesting though, isn't it, to think about, you know, I read something this morning about how our kind of work clothing cultures have obviously kind of changed, as you say, in the last 12 months. But maybe in its own way, it's a bit of an opportunity to think, well, you know, it's not been as easy to buy as many clothes the last 12 months. Might I buy, you know, fewer clothes but better clothes, you know? And again, I suppose the other angle to this, which is quite interesting, and I think is an interesting one to explore, is about how to not make this elitist as well. Do you know what I mean? In terms of sustainable clothing can't be just about the people who can buy the £120, you know, item of clothing. You know what I mean? It's got to be about how do most of us in our daily lives work out ways to, you know, which again, in terms of some of the stuff we're doing with Leeds Fashion Futures, kind of looking at how we look after our clothes as well. Do you know what I mean? Whether washing them a bit less or a lower.
Well, I would say I'm definitely washing my clothes a lot less now for lockdown. I mean, part of it is because I'm so lazy and I never go anywhere. We actually don't go anywhere, so and they're not exactly seeing loads of exercise, let's be honest. You know, but actually I reckon that my clothes will last at least one day, if not more, than they would ordinarily before they need to go in the wash. And you know, those sorts of things are quite interesting.
Yeah. And I think they're then practical things. And again, that's what we're really interested in our work. You know, what are the things that we can do on a daily basis that might just keep our clothes going that bit longer? We've got a video coming up next week of with Lucy Siegel, you know, the journalist who does a lot around sustainability and fashion. She says something about, you know, only buy a new item of clothing if you can convince yourself you're going to wear it 30 times, you know. And again, that's just I'm sure there's plenty of people who do that already, but it's just a useful little kind of reminder, isn't it, to think, you know, do I need this, and is it something that I'm going to get good kind of value out of?
So Rachel, just kind of, because we're coming up towards the end, I mean, I guess you would make the plea, wouldn't you? You would say, really appreciating this unbelievable history that we've got and this amazing kind of track record. It's so important that we don't forget that, as you say, and that we keep remembering it, and that places like Sunnybank Mills, you know, that we celebrate's the wrong word, but do you know what I mean? That we kind of keep those and maybe help that make our decisions for the future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the textile heritage can impact on what happens in the future. We can learn from their mistakes as well as their successes. You know, the success of the shoddy industry had its drawbacks too. You know, there's always elements that you can learn from, and I think we've forgotten quite a lot of the passion and history behind this area. I think it's just been lost in the noise of money making and iPhones and computers. It's just got lost. And you need that history, you need that connection with where you live. I mean, nearly every little town around Leeds, I bet if they walk down the street, they'd see a mill building or they'll see a weaver's house. They just need to look and be connected more with their local history, as you know, that's on their doorstep. We have so much heritage and textile heritage in this area to enjoy. We need to embrace it and learn from it.
And how wonderful it is that Sunnybank Mills is doing that by keeping the archive, having you there. They are absolutely treasuring that and making it in normal times available for us all. Well, even now, as you're saying, online.
It's online, yeah.
So it is wonderful. So I think, you know, we need to, as a city, say a massive thanks to the gods as well for doing that, you know, for keeping that going and us not losing it, really.
Yeah. And it's worth saying as well, I mean, we, and Rachel's been part of this, we're putting together a Leeds textile trail where it'll be an online trail and then people can follow, basically telling some of those stories, you know, Sunnybank Mills being one of them, but loads of other interesting stories of people and places and events in Leeds history that are kind of fascinating in themselves. But again, I think the thing we're interested in is looking at them and then thinking, right, well, what does that make us think about today? What might it help us to reflect on what might come tomorrow? So we'll be launching that literally in the next week or so. So we'll let you know more about that when it's live.
Just to say, we have got a comment, Monsi on Facebook says, I think it'd be good to increase awareness in people that clothes can be recycled when they are not good enough to reuse or sell in charity shops. Lots of people throw their slightly soiled clothes into their rubbish bins because they don't know about it. That is so true, and that's just something that almost breaks all our hearts, doesn't it? And we just, you know, if Leeds Fashion Future is doing anything, it's saying never ever throw your clothes.
Yeah. So
rubbish bin.
Yeah. So I mean, 4,000 tons we reckon is the estimate of how much clothing gets put in our bins at home in Leeds each year. So we've been doing stuff on that, and we'll be doing more to, as you say, to give people their options in terms of kind of textile banks. And then it's back, you know, and the stuff we've talked about already this afternoon, isn't it? You know, thinking about options for repair and things like that before your clothes get to that kind of stage. But it's a really good point.
Yeah. Remember, and just remember their history. You know, remember they don't kind of come out of nothing. Do you know what I mean? There's a long history there. Rachel, when we're allowed to, I'm definitely can I come up and have a look?
You're more welcome.
Definitely, yeah.
I do like that sofa as well. I have to say, I'm liking that sofa a lot. That looked quite nice in my front room, but there you go.
It's
Reuse
from
and all
here.
Reuse. And there's also a very nice cafe anyway as well up at the Mills, isn't there?
Yes, nice cake too.
Yeah. So what more can we want? Oh, Rachel, maybe from Sunny Back Mills, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
here on the Leeds Fashion Futures Lunchtime Live. Thank you, Rob. And
Yeah,
well
thanks,
done,
Beck.
Rob, on keeping that all going because my connection kept all away.
Yeah, it's all right. We got there, didn't we? Yeah.
My
Yeah,
connection
nice
just
one.
cut out at the point at which I apologise for the fact that my connection keeps cutting out. So maybe it's time
It's time
to
to
say
go.
goodbye. Just
Yeah.
check out the Sunnybank Mills website, and we'll see you all soon. We're back on Friday. Join us back on Friday, 1 o'clock.
All right. Thanks, Beck. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.